sit next to you, so I'll shake hands with Andy, and I'll shake hands with Katie, and here are my friends, and give yourself a big hug, and here am I. We stand together hand in hand and think the the traditional caretakers of this land on which we like to play. We promise to look after it every day. I actually chose the land acknowledgement that we use with our kiddos for our Saturday morning story hour, but I think that adults find it, fun to also move around for this land acknowledgement. We are so thrilled to have you here today for today's conversation with author Randy Shaw and Katie Conry on the history of the Tenderloin. And before we begin, I'd love to get a sense of who is in the room. So how many of you are here who are already members of Mechanics Institute? My gosh, I would say in a visual understanding, around 75% of you. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'd like to see your hands as well. All right, so we have a half dozen who are here for the first time. Wonderful. Mechanics Institute is a historic library, cultural center, and also the oldest continually operating chess club in the United States, right here in downtown San Francisco. We aspire to be a kind of community living room for history lovers, for writers, for chess players, and so forth. A place where you can come and read, reflect, learn, and be in conversation with others who are thinking about and shaping the world through words. Here are the bios for today's speakers. Katie Conry, who is on your left, is a founding employee of the Tenderloin Museum and has served as its executive director since 2016. Under her leadership, the museum has established itself as a renowned destination for community-driven, historically inspired arts programs. Katie is also spearheading two major expansion projects that will significantly enhance the museum's size and capacity. And let's give a warm round of applause for And of course, just to my right is Randy Shaw. He is the director of San Francisco's Tenderloin Housing Clinic, which he helped found in 1980. His 5 previous books include The Activist Handbook, the second edition, Beyond the Field, Cesar Chavez, the UFW, and the Struggle for Justice in the 21st Century, and Generation Priced Out, Who Gets to Live in the New Urban America. Shaw has led the campaign to create the National Uptown Tenderloin Historic District and founded the Tenderloin Museum. He is also the editor of BeyondCron.org and, of course, the author of the book that is for sale in the back today, which you can also pick up at the end of the talk. And let's give a warm round of applause for Randy Shaw. And we'll pass the mic to get us started.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. And as you can tell from the bio, I've worked in Tenderloin for 45 years. And about 20 years ago, I started to think about how can we build this neighborhood, what are its strengths? And I thought, well, it's history. And we started in a woman in G.G. Platt, that name ring a bell, that name ring a bell. That name ring a bell, then when G.G. Platt, and she died last year. She fought to save the city of Paris when they were doing that whole thing. Anyway, she said, why don't you try to make it a National Historic District? So we got some money from the city and we moved in that direction. And as we were doing that, I started to think, we have all these great buildings in Tenderloin. What's the history of this neighborhood? Because even though I see a lot of older people here, maybe none of us in this room have lived to see Tenderloin in its great times. It's great times. And they weren't just a short time. And so what I decided to do was to research and uncover the lost history of Tenderloin. And, went to the UC Berkeley Library and looked at everything they had, and I noticed that all these classic books about San Francisco, like by Gertrude Atherton and other names you're familiar with, you go to the index, the word Tenderloin doesn't appear. And so I started digging deeper, and going into it, and discovered that, from 1907, when San Francisco was rebuilt after the earthquake, into early 1960s, the Tenderloin was one of the most prosperous neighborhoods in San Francisco. How many of you knew that? Couple, maybe read the early edition of my book. But the point is that most people have a view from the post-60s view, where the Tenderloin's had a rough 50 years. And in the 30s, where the Depression was racking San Francisco, Tenderloin did great. Boom. What was the secret of the Tenderloin? And I uncovered it in Solomon's book. I explain how it happened. But the secret of the Tenderloin was we had a great above-ground economy. We have a matchbook book, a collection of my matchbooks we put into a book that you can buy on the Tenderloin Museum website.
All right.
It used to be virtually every retail space in the Tenderloin was a bar, an entertainment venue, or a restaurant, or a club of some sort. There were no nonprofits, ground floor spaces like they became. There were no corner liquor stores everywhere. There was an occasional liquor store, but not like what's happening. There were no porn shops. The Tenderloin was an amazing neighborhood. People from around the whole Bay Area came. Because also, what was bordering the Tenderloin? If you wanted to see a first-run movie in San Francisco during the 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, where do you go? Market Street. What borders all those theaters? The Tenderloin. Market Street never had any good restaurants, so you go to the restaurant, you go to the movie, and you eat the Tenderloin. Original Joe's is very famous, probably many of you were in the Tenderloin location. We had restaurants everywhere. So we had this great above-ground economy. But what we had that other neighborhoods in San Francisco didn't have was we were the gambling capital of the entire Bay Area. And gambling drove the Tenderloin economy. And you know why it's called the Tenderloin? Because originally in New York, it came out of an expression where a police officer who was transferred to a more vice-heavy district thought, well, now I can get more bribes to allow it, and instead of eating cheaper steak, I can get a Tenderloin. Well, our police did very well here in the Tenderloin. And it was known, the police chief would be gambling at the Ambassador Hotel in the basement, and they'd be playing poker and all that. It wasn't a secret, but it was allowed. So our economy was booming. We had Black Hawk Jazz Club in the 50s. We had clubs, we had entertainers coming. It was just be happening places. North Beach was a rival to it, but that one just had Broadway. We had a whole neighborhood full of activities. So we were doing great. And then we had a very, very, very fortunate luck. A man named George Christopher. Does that name ring a bell to anybody here? Yeah. Okay. He became mayor of San Francisco. And George Christopher had a brother who had drug problems. And instead of waiting, saying to the brother, why don't you get some treatment? And the brother kept going in and out of trouble. George Christopher blamed, quote, the Tenderloin for his brother's problems. Even though his brother eventually went south to Las Vegas and had problems. Nevertheless, in George Christopher's mind, all of his family problems were because of the Tenderloin. So when even before he became mayor, and this is all in the book, details, even before he became mayor, he was looking for ways to get rid of gambling in the Tenderloin. Now, some of you may be thinking, is this guy up here saying we should legalize gambling and bribery? I mean, why is this thinking that? No, I'm not. But here's the thing. You have a system in place where everybody knows certain activities in the Tenderloin. If you're going to curtail that, and what happened after World War II is like the Chamber of Commerce and all these places all around America got into good government. So bribery of police officers didn't fit with good government. I get it. But maybe what you do is you say, okay, folks, I'm going to give some time. We're going to be ending this bribery situation here in the Tenderloin. And let's talk about how we can keep these businesses afloat. Let's talk about how we can transition. That's what we do today, right? We have they call it conversion. We close the Air Force base, the Army base, the military base, and there's plans to convert it to a peacetime use. Christopher didn't care. So they take away our economy, our underground economy, but we still had a great above ground economy. Let me ask this crowd here. cable car on Farrell and Jones. Look at that, we got people here who did it. Because otherwise, when I say to people that Tenderloin used to have cable cars, they say, what are you talking about? Cable cars in Tenderloin? Yes, we did. Why don't we have cable cars in Tenderloin? George Christopher felt they were an obstruction of people driving downtown. Now, obviously, cable cars are a great way to get customers to businesses. He didn't care. So at the same time, they're taking away our gambling, they're destroying our retail businesses and businesses because people can't get there anymore. Then, he's not satisfied with that. He says, we still have to get people downtown. I mean, it's kind of, when you think about it, we have all these buses going down Market downtown. We have the 38 Erie, it still was there then. But somehow in his mind, the Tenderloin neighborhood was obstructing people from the Richmond, Sunset, Western Addition from getting downtown. So it had to be destroyed. What happens next? They take away all our two-way streets and make them one-way. So, you know, I don't know if you guys know anything about this. I spent 10 years getting two-way streets on two stretches of the Tenderloin, Ellis and Eddy. Two-way streets are much safer for pedestrians, traffic is slower. And when you take one-way streets and you limit the cable car, then you aren't turning the Tenderloin into a place people just zoom through. So what happened with all these things Christopher was doing? Then you combine them. Some of you know about the history of Market Street. Starting in the 50s, Market Street declined. It was actually declining in the 30s, but then we had the war to bail it out. It started declining again in the 50s. And suddenly Market Street movie theaters were as popular. By the 60s, you had the suburbs actually running first-run movies, so you didn't have to come to San Francisco to see a first-run movie. So all the consumers who kept the Tenderloin's above-ground economy going for decades were leaving and gone. So, and you got no help from the city government at all, because they didn't care about Tenderloin. So by the 60s, in 1960, think of this, in 1960, in the census, there was not one block of the Tenderloin declared blight. Not one. The entire Mission District was blighted in 1960. The entire South of Market was blighted in 1960. The Tenderloin had one block. So we were still doing well until the 60s started, and that's when they decided to just let all kinds of illegal activities go on. Tenderloin wasn't surviving. It's the history that you sort of probably know a lot about. We did have some positive things, you know, Blythe came and Cecil Williams stuff, but it couldn't make up for the poverty that was growing in the Tenderloin. And throughout the 60s and the 70s, City Hall just made some very bad decisions. Basically, they decided anything goes in the Tenderloin. You want to do prostitution, drugs. We did get the honor from the New York Times in 1981 to be called the porn capital of the United States. North Beach and us, but they only had Broadway. We had the whole Tenderloin from a porn shop because every retail was vacant. So a video operator, porn shop, you know, come to the Tenderloin. When I arrived in the Tenderloin, I had a picture of this in the book. Turk and Taylor was like giant Frenchie's K&T, see a naked girl for a quarter. Wow! It was only a quarter in those days. So the Tenderloin developed a very, 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 very bad reputation. Right? Porn, crime, and then in those days, prostitutes would be out on the street, not underground, not behind curtains. It was all over. And so we took this great neighborhood and kind of turned it into a very place that only people who couldn't afford to live anywhere else would go. So it was very grim, starting in the mid-60s, going into the 70s, and then we got extraordinarily lucky break. The Vietnam War ended, and refugees from Vietnam came to the Tenderloin. Why did they come to the Tenderloin? They had more vacancies than any other neighborhood. And even though the apartments were a little small for families of 4 or 5, they were just happy to be out of Vietnam, out of Cambodia, out of Laos, because, you know, we expanded our war in Vietnam and Cambodia and drove all those people out. So suddenly we had a whole different neighborhood in the late 70s. We people were here in those days, remember that? I remember, I had never had Vietnamese food. Come to Tenderloin, there's Vietnamese restaurants everywhere. And so suddenly, and they brought something that Tenderloin had never had to children. And the interesting thing about that is the Tenderloin really is the largest apartment, and the first apartment and hotel district ever built in America. One thing about the Tenderloin, used to be one single family home which was built in the 60s, so that doesn't count. All the housing was built were single occupancies, SRO hotels, and mostly studio apartments with some one bedrooms. Very few two bedrooms. Professionals used to live in the Tenderloin. You know, they used to, lawyers, doctors, all lived in the Tenderloin. It was a great neighborhood in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. So suddenly we had children, and people see hope. And there is hope, and the Tenderloin is moving forward. And we were moving forward, and I detail this all in the book, but I can't get everything in this short talk. But we then, does anyone remember the Sizzler opening in the Tenderloin? Leroy Looper at the Cadillac Hotel opened a Sizzler restaurant after the Cadillac. That was seen as like the transformation of the Tenderloin is happening. It was 1986. But we elected Ronald Reagan president in 1980. And one thing I learned is when you elect a president, often the impact of that president and budget decisions don't start taking effect for a number of years. Even though he was president starting in 81, his 81 budget took a long time to trickle down. Because there's all this stuff from the Carter administration that gets built later and everything. So by 87, the whole city economy was in decline. And when things declined in San Francisco, they really declined in Tenderloin. So our progress was just going straight up. We had the first community organization, North American Planning Coalition. We had a big battle against luxury hotels. Tenderloin was doing great. Then, starting in 87, we started to decline again. And that's sort of been the history of this neighborhood. And a lot of it is related to the mayor. And just sort of to come to the end, we can have a question time at the end, and then we can talk about this more, and it's all in the book. That I don't think I even realized how disruptive Linda Green was for the mayor, being there during that COVID period, what she did in Tenderloin. And a lot of people think, oh, she was great during COVID. See the pictures in my book about what the Tenderloin looked like COVID, you won't have that view. She let anything go in Tenderloin. The 6-foot rule was 1 foot in Tenderloin. Drug dealers were all next to each other. No one said they had to be 6 feet apart. She was out there sending the sheriffs out there to Dolores Park to make sure the picnics weren't too close. Tenderloin, anything goes. So we had a rough stretch which really hurt our neighborhood. We were really on the verge of a massive, permanent transformation, as was mid-market. If COVID had occurred 2 years later, it would have been a big difference, but it occurred just as things were under construction, hadn't opened yet, they weren't going to open because of COVID. And now, I believe we're back with the mayor who's following the lead of Ed Lee, who's a big supporter. We've never had a mayor like Ed Lee supporting Tenderloin. We love the Tenderloin. And I don't know that anybody loves the Tenderloin, but he's committed to improving and moving in the right direction. So it's a happy ending. And I'll leave this, I've got my 20 minutes, I'm going to leave this to Katie, and take it from there, we can have questions after. Thank you.
This is our 10th anniversary video, which gives you a great background on the Tenderloin Museum.
The Tenderloin had this amazing music scene, entertainment scene, jazz scene, everything was happening here, and yet when people wrote their histories, the famous books, the Tenderloin wasn't in the index. So many things that really put us on the national map, but no one knew about. So I thought, we need to have a museum.
At the Tenderloin Museum, we have a permanent collection about the history of the neighborhood. We showcase a lot of working class social justice history that's often left out of history books. The Tenderloin really has been maligned, written about negatively, or ignored pretty much its entire existence. We're here to provide more context, show about where the Tenderloin's been in the past, show the vibrant community that's here today, show where it could be going in the future.
Randy had this brilliant idea of doing a historic district, and then after the historic district, he thought we should really show all the beautiful things that the Tenderloin is. So let's start a museum.
I walked out of my apartment about 10 years ago, and they were building something new, and they had the words porn and protest and queer and punk, and so I was like, well, what is this going to be? What is this great thing that I live across the street from? And it turned out to be the Tenderloin Museum. So I basically just came in the first day and said, I'm going to volunteer for you, and I've been here ever since. Just from going from being a volunteer here to being on the board and helping make decisions about this place makes it really feel like home to me. I love the Tenderloin Museum because it really teaches everyone about this kind of maligned area in town and how it's more than the sum of its parts. It's a beautiful community with beautiful people, and it just shines a light on this area that needs to be shown on.
Tenderloin staff is a group of humanitarians that I truly believe in. Tenderloin also has addressed so many issues pertaining to other walks of life in a positive way. So I'm thankful for being a part of the Tenderloin. I feel like I'm coming among friends and family, mostly family.
We have weekly public programming that's at the intersection of art, history, and community, and we've become known as specializing in historically inspired arts programs. We produced a play about the Compton's Cafeteria Riot in 2018, and the Compton's Cafeteria Riot is one of the first known instances of queer militant resistance to police harassment in U.S. history. It was a trans-led riot that happened at the corner of Turk and Taylor in the Tenderloin in 1966. Promoting this historical event through programming, exhibitions, and our play has really become a cornerstone of the Tenderloin Museum. And we're about to open a second storefront on Larkin Street where we can produce the play year-round. And it's going to run every Friday and Saturday night starting in April of this year, 2025.
I love the Tenderloin Museum because they bring history to life for me. Learning about the Compton's Cafeteria riots, not just from a story or seeing the movie, but actually being here in person with Susan Stryker and the folks at the Tenderloin Museum brought it all the way home for me.
The way the residents came together to fight big development and to restore the historic part of Tenderloin, the women's movement, the LGBTQ movement, everything happened in Tenderloin. Without Tenderloin, there is no San Francisco.
There's this new movement I felt in the last year or so where the arts are coming back to San Francisco, and the Tenderloin Museum is part of that.
You know, I've been coming and doing things with the Tenderloin Museum for 10 years, and I continue. You know, I'm here every week in the Tenderloin. So it's important to me to keep the history of the Tenderloin alive and the community and the activities that I see that are so beautifully covered by the Tenderloin Museum.
With the Tenderloin Museum, I started off as a person that was working in the Compton's Cafeteria Riot. I play one of the characters that initiates the riot, and we bring that history to life.
We have been community partners with the Tenderloin Museum since its inception, and I love it because it's just such a wonderful place, a community haven, and it celebrates a rich, diverse, and very, very interesting history.
What I love about the Tenderloin Museum is that it's focused on our neighborhood, it's focused on the history and the contemporary of all the beautiful arts interventions, people interventions, radical movements, underground movements, and everything in between, which really is a special way to celebrate the same right.
It's probably one of the only museums that I know that really is at its core wanting to meet the community. And without that, I feel like it would be impossible for us to tell the story of the historical references of this neighborhood, and then also show the importance of the people that live and exist or have existed in this community here as well.
Even if you're brand new to this community, come in here and learn what this community is. Because the media might tell you one thing, come here and find out what the real meaning of this neighborhood, what our real history is, the struggles that we have and the struggles that we don't have. I asked everyone of the Sure Community have a museum. They said, no, we have a museum.
We're very proud of this place being here.
I can't believe it's been 10 years. Here's for 10 and 10 and 10 more.
Promoting this history can not only help foster a positive sense of identity for those that live here, it can also change people's perceptions. And we have a chance to really increase our impact tremendously by expanding the museum. So we are tripling the size of the museum. We are going to be able to significantly expand our permanent collection, include a lot more diversity, community voices, oral histories, and it's really an opportunity to get to listen to 10 years of feedback from our community about the museum and to meaningfully incorporate their suggestions. And we're very excited to have San Francisco's first ever neon gallery here at the museum. We're also going to have an exhibition on the Indian American immigrant community, how it relates to the Tenderloin and the national hotel industry. We also are going to have a significantly sized art gallery. It's going to create a ton of interest both locally and around the world, and it's really going to put the Tenderloin on the map as a major international destination. All are welcome to be part of this ongoing story.
You ask people where does the movement started in San Francisco, they'll say, well, that's the Castro district, right? Maybe it's Cold Street. You know the right is contemporary, detail of the book. All the bars, all the underground stuff, all the Tenderloin is one big history that was ignored. The other thing is that the largest hotel owners in America are the American Indians, the innkeepers of America. The first hotel they bought in San Francisco was in the Tenderloin. What they have spawned nationally, people started here, and the entire national hotel industry is sort of spawned people who came here and succeeded in attending. So that's going to be a special exhibit in our new expansion. So I'll turn it over to Katie.
Hi everyone. So when the Tenderloin Museum first opened almost 10 years ago, a neighborhood whose history had been ignored, maligned, written about negatively, now had its own museum. And in those 10 years, I think we've really demonstrated what history making can mean for a community. And like you learned about in the video, we do have these two major expansion projects, both the expansion of the physical museum, and we intend to open that space in fall of 26, and then also our play about the Compton's Cafeteria Riot, which is open. A little applause for that, please. It's been years of work. Thank you.
I don't know that it was slated to open in June of 2020 and open in
What was going on in June of 2020? Yeah. Well, like Randy just mentioned, and this is very much related to the history he was sharing. I mean, how many of you had heard about the Compton's Cafeteria Riot before today? All right, so that's great. How many of you knew that the gay civil rights movement started, the national movement started in the Tenderloin? Fantastic.
This group here knows this?
Yeah, seriously, that's so like Randy was talking about, you know, the neighborhood being used as a containment zone. Kind of one of the only silver linings of that is, you know, it really fostered this fledgling LGBTQ community in the 60s. It was a time when, you know, that community would not have been like allowed to exist anywhere else in San Francisco, but was allowed to exist in the Tenderloin. And there was a lot of the earliest like political organizing of this community for queer rights happened in the early 60s. And there was a large number of gay and trans people living and working in the neighborhood at that time. So, like the Vanguard, how many of you are familiar with the Vanguard? That was a really early political group. They were really fostered by Blythe Memorial and Cecil Williams. So they were like a radical political group of mainly queer youths in the neighborhood at the time. Then there was also like a large trans community, mainly trans women living on Turk and Eddy Street and frequenting Compton's Cafeteria. So that was a chain, a local chain. It was one of the only places, it really became a community gathering spot for the trans community. I mean, it's one of the only places that would serve them in the entire city. and a lot of trans women at the time were doing sex work. It was the only kind of jobs that were available to them at the time. So Compton's really became this like community space where trans women could buy 1 cup of coffee and stay all night, check in on their friends, go before and after working, doing sex work. And I mean, this was a time where it was still illegal to dress not as your gender ascribed at birth. And while like this community was being allowed to live in the Tenderloin, there was still a great deal of police harassment. And the Vanguard had been protesting the treatment they had been receiving at Compton. So there was a lot of like political strife stirring up at this time. And it erupted one hot August night. I know we don't really get hot nights in August, but where the police raided Compton's and a trans woman threw a hot cup of coffee in the cop's face. And everyone fought back. They broke out all the windows, they hit them over the heads with their bags that often had like bricks in them as like a safety issue while they were working on the streets. And they held the line. They got the cops to flee Compton's. And there was a riot that raged all night long. And this is the first known instant of militant resistance by the queer community to police harassment in US history. So 3 years before the more famous Stonewall riots. And it was very much like a catalyst, like watershed moment that really changed people's attitudes in the neighborhood and made them, kind of increase the organizing that was happening at the time by this community. I mean, it was also completely buried in the press and was essentially lost to history until Susan Stryker uncovered evidence of the riot while she was working as a historian at the GLBT Historical Society. And she made the documentary Screaming Queens in 2005, which is the only reason we're talking about it right now. Since that moment, it's really become a really important organizing point for the trans community in the Bay Area and a real source of pride and inspiration. The Tenderloin Museum is the first cultural institution to have an exhibition about the riot. It's really become a cornerstone of our programming, including producing a play about it in 2018. Did anyone here see the 2018 production of the play? All right, excellent, thank you. Miles is a friend of the museum's too, through Aunt Charlie's. He works as librarian here at the Mechanics Institute. The play was written by Donna Persona and Colette Legrand, who are 2 performers at Aunt Charlie's, the last queer bar in the Tenderloin, and Mark Nasser. I introduced them at the museum in 2017, and the 3 of them spent a year writing the script. It was workshopped heavily at the Tenderloin Museum. It opened on Polk Street in 2018. It got rave reviews and sold out its entire run. And it's an immersive show, so it was originally produced in a restaurant where you go into the restaurant and you're served a meal and then the riot unfolds around you. We had to close in that location, and we had been working to bring it back within the boundaries of the neighborhood, and had a whole plan put together, Randy alluded to, in 2020, that was seriously derailed by the pandemic. And basically, due to the changing economic factors in the city and the neighborhood, there wasn't really a restaurant we could partner with within the boundaries of the neighborhood. So we leased a space on Market Street, a vacant storefront, to create a diner set where the play can now run indefinitely in its own dedicated venue. And that opened last month, and we've had a month of sold out shows, and please come and see it. We've gotten some great reviews and a great audience response, and I think championing this historical event is so important. It changes the dominant narrative, the mainstream historical narrative that the queer civil rights movement began with Stonewall. So it gives San Francisco and the Tenderloin back its rightful place in history as the vanguard of the movement, and gives trans women back their rightful place in history as the vanguard of the movement. I think when we produced the play, we're also producing it in an entirely different political climate than we produced it in 2018. In 2018, I feel like telling the story about the trans community and their early resistance and their fight to be themselves was more about raising awareness of the community, whereas we know now we're living in a time of an extreme backlash against that community. So I think it's more important than ever. Not only is it, say, like, you know, these people have always existed, here's their history. I think the play is also very humanizing. A lot of people feel like they don't know any trans people, and when you're at the play, you're there with them in the restaurant, and you're really getting to know their struggles really intimately. And I think also it's a roadmap to resistance in the current moment we're in as well. I think we can learn a lot from these people that risk so much to be themselves. And it's very inspiring, and I think we can learn a lot about how to move forward from here as a society as well. So thank you.
How is the neighborhood protecting itself against the big developers?
Well, we have the strongest land use protection of anywhere in the world almost. You can't really, there's an 8-story height limit in what's the Tenderloin. There's no space to build. When I got involved in Tenderloin in 1980, there was a big fight in these 3 luxury hotels in Florida. And we thought at that time the zoning allowed the Tenderloin to be 40-story buildings in every part. So we got a rezone in 1985. So really the zoning is so strict that it's prevented that kind of problem. You know, it used to be, everybody told me, just a matter of time before the Tenderloin's been gentrified. And then during the dot-com boom in the 90s, like, just a matter of time. And then Twitter came, just a matter of time. And I've always insisted to this day, we have protections to prevent it. And if anyone thinks the Tenderloin is gentrified, you haven't been in the neighborhood in a while. So we have protections. It's land use, it's proactive land use protections that we enacted before it got bad. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you tell us where the play is being held and times, et cetera, et cetera? Thank you.
It's at 835 Larkin Street, which is just before Geary, and it runs Friday and Saturday nights. It's sold out through May, but there's still tickets available for June and July. Begins at 7 p.m.
I called on this person here. How good, we're sure.
Can you say a little about the role that art played in terms of its destruction of the movie theaters on Market Street, and the role that the decimation of 3rd Street corridor, the SRO hotels there, for the construction of the Urban Waiver Center played in the effect it had on the Tenderloin?
Well, the main impact, you know, there was a choice. San Francisco was choosing between the Tenderloin and South Market, the convention center. And I discovered, and it's in the book, the reason they chose, they turned down the Tenderloin is because if you actually walk down any street, you might notice to the left, it starts going uphill. So the Tenderloin was considered too hilly for the convention center. And also, one thing about South Market, you know, what we used to call Skid Row was never the Tenderloin, it was always 3rd Street. So what the main impact of what redevelopment did to displace it, they had to build fund hotels in the Tenderloin, Section 8 hotels, 4 of them. So the seniors displaced from those came to the Tenderloin. So we had a lot more seniors as a result, and subsidized Section 8 housing as a result of that. Art didn't really affect the Tenderloin in the short term. It killed mid-market businesses, but not the Tenderloin. Yes.
Thank you both so much. As a native San Franciscan who lived through all of this, but started as a child, it's interesting because it was a neighborhood you drove through. I didn't appreciate the one-way street. My question is this, to you, Randy, especially, and I know you haven't really mentioned all the other ethnic groups that are down there, but the other piece that's missing is private investment and philanthropy in the neighborhood. And have you ever seen, or do you have ideas about where money can come from to invest in this neighborhood at this time?
Well, I will tell you that Mayor Lee stimulated more investment in the Tenderloin in 5 years than the preceding 50. When a mayor tries to raise money for a neighbor, they're usually successful in San Francisco. We're hoping we are, but we're always hoping we do the same thing. We have given economic climate right now for the city, as you all know. But Katie can make a pitch. We love having plans to support the expansion of the museum. Historically, it took me a long time to raise the money for the museum because traditional philanthropy will give to St. Anthony's in July. They think of the Tenderloin as poor people. We want to help feed them. They don't think of Tenderloin as a cultural thing, have a museum. So we're trying to deal with that level. The philanthropists have not been that interested. Outside of those two institutions get a lot of philanthropy. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you know of, this was great, I enjoyed the film before we go into the play. Do you know of other neighborhoods that you have in mind as maybe not wholly, but in part that have been successful at creating the kind of formula you're working for, where they didn't err towards gentrification, but they were able, I mean, there have to be somewhere.
You know, that's a great question. I think that what's makes the Tenderloin rather unique, unfortunately. I mean, if you think about New York City, it's hard to think of a neighborhood that has escaped gentrification in the world. And one thing that we have such an array of, one thing that I've worked on for a long time is passing residential tailwinds, protecting our SROs. Seattle demolished all the SROs. New York City tried to save their SROs. The court said they couldn't. They lost a lot of them. Los Angeles saved some of them in the downtown area, but not beyond. So saving our SROs in a neighborhood where SROs are a dominant housing type, I think was key to saving the Tenderloin. Because, as I've always argued, the gentry don't want to live in an SRO. They might live in an SRO with a beautiful private bath, and especially new built ones, not the ones that we have in the size they're built. They're mostly 100 to 150 square foot rooms in the Tenderloin. And we have the nicest SROs built. You go to Chinatown, they're under 70 square feet. But Tenderloin. So there's parts of Chinatown that aren't going to be gentrified, but really the Tenderloin for a 33-block area, and over 400 buildings, is unique. That's why we want tourists to come see it, and all of you should come to the museum and come to the play. Yes.
I moved here. In 1990, and I lived on Jones Post in that apartment building. And I didn't have any problem walking around there, even though there were a prostitute walking around. But when I told my friends I was living there, everybody was just like, "Oh, what are you doing over there?" Blah blah blah. But I didn't feel any dangers at all. But about 5 years ago, I was taking a class at the law school right downtown near the H&R Museum. Yes, and I had to go someplace, so I followed my GPS and walked to the bus station, right on the edge of the Tenderloin.
Yeah, just outside.
Yeah. What really made me very uncomfortable was there's a whole bunch of men just gathered there, and there's a parker right in front. And there's a guy who just urinating right on the street.
Well, one of the best things that I didn't mention is that happened in Tenderloin is Phil Ginsberg, our park director, had a great solution to problems at UN Plaza. Because UN Plaza was affecting everyone coming to bar and the 18th century. To a skateboard park. And I was a huge supporter that people were skeptical, and if you didn't buy UN Plaza, they didn't even recognize it. It's better than it's been in the last 50 years because Phil had a vision to see what the difference was. So, yeah, UN Plaza did a lot. I mean, a former mayor spent $22 million building what she called the Tenderloin Linkage Center, which was basically an open drug site. Basically sent a message out to the whole nation. Want to come do drugs openly? Come here to the Tenderloin. Come here to the UN Plaza. So it's a night and day difference from what it was when you experienced it.
Yeah, but what I saw was not in the US Plaza. I know UN Plaza. Because I go to Asian markets in Milan. But this is another street. You're trying to get people to come to Tenderloin, I think the first thing is are things like that. Just really prevent people from coming. Because actually it was a bit scary. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for this interesting talk. I live in the Cadillac building. And here's my question. Do you see any way to eliminate or tone down the very debilitating noise that comes from the corners, all four corners of Leavenworth and Eddy?
That's a good question, and we should talk about it separately. There's things that are allowed in Tenderloin that aren't allowed in the neighborhoods, like making noise on the first one. I know the exact corner you're talking about. And there's ways to deal with it, but we have to get the police to do that.
They won't do it. If you go down to the monthly police meeting, they will shine you on. I'm at a loss. I don't know how to do
Well,
that.
I would say that there was an incident around right on the edge of the Plaza, there's a bakery, and there's a guy who gets up at 6 in the morning and pop music. They figured out how to stop him, so we can talk another time about individual things, but I understand that's a trouble. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm interested about the UN Plaza. You say it's much nicer now?
Yeah.
I thought the farmer's market was really, I love the farmer's market there.
Well, it's across the street.
Yeah, and it's
farmer's market
so tiny.
The farmer's market is actually bigger than it's ever been, and it's doing better than it's ever done. Phil Gilbert got a lot of criticism when he moved to the farmer's market, and it's doing better than others. A waiting list of vendors in the farmer's market. So a lot of people weren't going to the farmer's market because they didn't want to deal with the problems of UN Plaza. One thing about the UN Plaza is interesting, because in borders of Tenderloin, a lot of people associate this crime with Tenderloin when it's outside the neighborhood. But UN Plaza was wrecking two neighborhoods when they let drug activity take over. Except we lost Whole Foods Market I mean, we had a mayor that allowed these things to happen. I have to be very blunt about that. I mean, it's up to, she allowed a police chief to just ignore what was happening on Market Street. And, we talk about some of the concerns people have about the perception of the Tenderloin. Mid-market is still suffering from perceptions of what happened 3 years ago. Once people have these bad experiences, they don't come back. So it's really important that we encourage people to give it another look.
It is much nicer.
Someone who hasn't had, okay, way in the back row.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very curious. I walked down Hyde Street a couple of weeks ago, and Hyde Street was nothing but homeless fellas and drugs. I mean, and when you talk about inviting people into the Tenderloin, tourists, I mean, that's not going to happen until some kind of dealing with that. Somebody deals with that. But my big question is, we're sitting here, and I absolutely agree with you that the Tenderloin has been much more important, much more interesting place. But where would you see it going? I mean, if we get together here in 25 years, are we going to also be talking about Tenderloin as being another drug homeless Disneyland, or is it going to? Or do you have a vision yourselves about where it could go, where it should go?
Just to be clear, my office on Hyde Street, I'm there all the time. I don't show that. There's a 300 block of Hyde at Hyde and Eddy.
I'll go take pictures this afternoon.
No.
Listen, no. Let's not kid ourselves. The Tenderloin is still suffering from drug and homelessness. It's not a made-up idea. The city is, but Tenderloin very distinctly. Where, though, how do we fix it without gentrifying?
What's that?
Fix it without gentrifying.
How do you fix something without gentrifying?
Well, I don't know how low-income and working people living in a building allows people to deal drugs outside. I don't see the connection. There's no connection there. It's a police issue. We're getting a new chief, and I think this mayor is more committed than the last one. But I'm just saying, for those of you listening about Hyde, the 300 block of Hyde, as I talked about, 2018, the New York Times said it's the worst block in San Francisco, and it's not improved that much. It's gotten better, but still, if you walk by, not by even our block 5. The other side of the street is fine at night. And up the 200 block is a scene where there's an oasis, the urban outlet side. So there's no drug activity there, and there's none on the 100 block or the Hastings block. So, but you know, people always say to me, I went to the Tenderloin and I saw this scene, it really upset me. And just to be honest, I don't know that we'll ever get rid of that in San Francisco. I mean, my daughter had an experience in another neighborhood that isn't considered anything like the Tenderloin, and she was out in outer Mission, and a guy was like taking his clothes off. A lot of this is San Francisco, not just the Tenderloin. You talk to people in Castro or talk to other neighborhoods, they'll say, this isn't just happening in the Tenderloin, so that's a problem we have to deal with.
I'll jump in on that too. I mean, a lot of the housing and low-income housing in the Tenderloin is protected. We also have like a lot of vacant storefronts, which are a huge issue in our neighborhood. So I mean, a lot of people like living and working in the neighborhood do feel like we benefit from new businesses opening up in these vacant storefronts. And that won't be a gentrifying factor in the same way as it could be in another neighborhood due to having so much protected housing. So I think the nonprofit arts are a great way of promoting, like moving into the vacant storefronts and creating positive activations in the neighborhood, bringing new people into the neighborhood is really important. And I think there's lots of amazing groups and businesses doing that. But the Tenderloin Museum, I think, is a great example of an organization that really focuses both on serving the people that live there and also bringing new people into the neighborhood to have a positive experience there.
And let me just mention that we house formerly homeless people in almost several hotels in Tenderloin. People complaining most about that activity we talked about are formerly homeless people themselves. It's like, yeah, I got my life together. What's wrong with this? Why are you allowing this outside? They're the ones living in the Tenderloin. Okay, so we have time for a couple more. Who hasn't spoken? Go right ahead.
Yeah, can you just map out for us the borders of the Tenderloin and what streets?
Well, the official historic issue, the border is actually the Erie up to Polk, not Polk, McAllister and Mason. Right? There's a couple blocks on Mason that are not in the Uptown Tenderloin Historic District. Post Street was in the historic Tenderloin, but what happened was the Lower Knott Hill Historic District included Post Street, so we couldn't include it in our district. But if you look at Post Street, it's really a Tenderloin county. Things change around Sutter. Sutter becomes a very different street than Post.
You might mention the interesting history of the space you're expanding into.
Sure. So, I mean, Randy mentioned the Sizzler earlier. That's actually the space that the Tenderloin Museum is currently in. Used to be the Sizzler, the ground floor of the Cadillac Hotel. So the Cadillac Hotel was built in 1908. It was like a fancy hotel when it was first built. It became de facto housing for poor people, and then Leroy and Kathy Looper bought it in 1977, renovated it, and didn't displace a single person. And it became the first nonprofit supportive housing on the West Coast and really became the model for the neighborhood. The space that we're expanding into, in 1908, that was the dining room ballroom of the Cadillac Hotel. Then for many years, it was Newman's Gym. Has anyone here been to Newman's Gym?
Newman's Gym.
All right.
One person, that's why we have to have a permanent exhibition.
So Muhammad Ali and other contemporaries boxed at Newman's Gym.
George Foreman.
You can still see on the floor where the ring was. And then for many years it was a preschool that moved out very recently. And the museum had the opportunity to lease that space. So the museum is currently about 3,200 square feet, and that new space is 6,850. So it's very exciting to really be able to listen to 10 years of feedback and expand our permanent collection, show more diversity, more oral histories, more community stories. Then we're going to have a special exhibition room on Indian American immigrant history in the neighborhood, like Randy alluded to. We have a tiny art gallery right now. We're going to have a huge art gallery in our new space. And then we'll also have an early education, youth-focused room. And as you saw, it's a very beautiful space with that huge skylight. So we're breaking ground in July. to expand the space. We certainly still need a lot of support. And I mean, we'll be doing hard hat tours and like programming in our new space probably before it's completely open with a new exhibit. So look out for that soon.
Let me just mention before we get this last question. I'm obviously giving you truncated answers about history, but they're certain. That's why I write a whole book, so we get all the answers. Let's take this one and then we'll bring it back.
Who first organized Urban Alchemy, and have they actually lost their contract?
No, it was organized by what was named. I'm embarrassed.
That's
Don't tell
okay.
them that I forgot.
London.
But what happened was that there's been a lot of issues on the contract. They're actually, the mayor's going to extend. It was a $20 million contract. The city's been forwarded. It's going to be extended past July at a scaled down rate. Like if you go to the Oasis, they don't have a bathroom there anymore. They don't have parking spaces for that thing. They're cutting back, but there'll still be a presence after July 1. So,
And who first, is that through the city, or who organized?
City is, but Miraberry is going to find the money, whether he uses philanthropy or funding, but he said there's going to be at least $10 million.
And did that start under London Green?
Yes, it did.
It did, that's one.
It did, and actually Urban Alchemy, it made a big difference, but it was supposed to do a lot more, and it never realized its ambitions because it was a problem with coordinating the police department.
What is Urban Alchemy?
Urban Alchemy, they're ambassadors, they're cheaper than police, so like in front of my office, there's an Urban Alchemy person, and they keep, but the challenge with Urban Alchemy, certain streets, like 3 block pie, they didn't feel safe on, so therefore, you're not on the blocks they don't feel safe on, so there's a question about the use of resources. But mid-market squares like it, and
I found it helpful.
yeah, you move under a block, it really works great. Okay, so we're gonna call it a day, and just say, I have a story on beyondcrime.org today about the Tenderloin's future. You might want to take a look at. I write a lot about Tenderloin Beyond Crime. And check out the book, happy to sign it, and spread the word that Tenderloin does have problems, but it's coming back. Thank you.
So I'll sit right here. I can sit right here and sign the book.
Actually, Katie's gonna do the book sales here and sign up here so that they can ask
Yeah, let me get
Are you selling granite?
Compton's cafeteria, very literal. Yeah, very to the point. Yeah. You can search online for streaming feeds.
if you would like to purchase a book, Katie will be handling the book sales over here, and Randy will be in the front of the room to sign their books. Have any questions?
Oh, I can be pretty expressive, I've been told. So
Yeah,
I'm sure there was a lot to read.
Okay, is that a yes or a no?
Okay, here we go. My credit card is preferred because I don't really have cash or change.
Thank you very much. I think 10 o'clock is
Is Randy all set up somewhere?
Hold on. Yes, he is. He's at the phone.
Okay. Thanks so much for everyone's interest.
Thank you, nice talking to you. Costco special.
People hate stuff, right? But we can check.
Well, I can't sure there was two services. Well, so you live in Tenderloin?
I'll wait till the line dissipates. I'm turning around when the line dissipates. Okay, I live at 665 Garrett. I've been living there for 47 years.
4 years. I used to go to, and I still.
I go for walks all the time. And yeah, I love.
Actually give me
my understanding is that a lot. The barrel.
Building next door, the ball game.
When they raise their hand.
That program.
That's the block, 6 o'clock, the fair is known as Tenderloin Heights.
I enjoyed the presentation.
Buildings themselves are beautiful buildings.
Love the drums. Go give me
We do a program where we, on average,
But since we have a recent.
Thank you.
Hi.
Mr.
Oh, sure. Actually, it's nice to meet you. My name is John Van Rachel. I live on 601 O'Farrell. I'm on Leavenworth and O'Farrell. And I've been since the president. I'm part of the Hamilton. 601 O'Farrell.
No.
You know Paula Hendricks?
Yes.
She used to be my apartment manager.
Okay.
But then the Hamilton, I just I went to like the 822 Geary last week to see like the transformation of Goodwill since you know they're moving that into like a.
During March, what's happening with
I've been getting active. I've been attending TBC meetings. And then I just got, like I told Randy, I saw his email this morning. But I haven't been in the museum. I retired 6 years ago, so I'm home now. So I see a lot more. And I'm actually, I just know I'm on the 7th floor, on the corner, on Leavenworth. So I see a lot more.
Yeah.
And the cat.
Well, come by the museum.
Yeah, you know, I have, as I mentioned, I'm retired. I have time to volunteer. If you need some interest in it, like the arts,
So, I guess two things. I didn't want to interrupt, but I guess one thing is I already see credit card. I also can give you exact change cash preference.
Maybe just be easier.
Okay, I can do credit card.
Do you take credit cards?
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, I guess, two possibilities. One thing is I'm a CPA, and if the Tenderloin Museum needs a purple and accounting officer, consider it.
Okay.
And the other thing is that as a CPA, I always like to see financial statements before I donate. And I was wondering whether you could provide me with them.
Sure. Do you have a card?
Yes, I do. I was wondering.
So my wife and I used to live in San Francisco until 2008, and then we moved away to one state. Just got back. Trying to wheel around.
You're also in the neighborhood or adjacent to?
Yeah, I live in the Tenderloin. It's the main reason I'm here. I've been living in that apartment for 47 years. As I told Randy, I used to be on the board of the hospitality house and for the trip report. I know more about the neighborhood than I would suspect most residents, but I'm sure there's a lot that, truthfully there's stuff that Randy said today that was new to me, so there's a lot I don't know, so, yeah.
Well,
Leave here,
my
or
museum
leave
is
there.
too. Yeah, we're running almost every week on
Really miss
Thursdays
San
too,
Francisco
so
full
it's always fun to come by
20
for an event.
One thing is I don't like paying admission fees, and I know a lot of museums I can get in for free because they have a Santa Barbara Museum membership that's, you know, at a certain level where they've got reciprocal membership. And I was wondering. Oh, okay.
And then we also, it's also free on Wednesdays for neighborhood residents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the chip on that side is very confusing. Yeah, we'll talk soon. And thanks for your interesting comment in the play as well.
Yeah, I can take this.
Hi.
We're definitely interested in the place and we'll see that.
Amazing. It's really good. I mean, it's.
What nights do you do it?
It's Friday and Saturday.
Let me know which days work for you. Saturdays or Sundays, I should be
We really
fairly
want it to
flexible
be like the
since
new
I'm off.
beach blanket battle.
Right,
So
and it's challenging
It's
too.
at night.
Yes.
That's good, that's what theater's supposed to do.
Yeah.
A more
Totally.
thoughtful beach blade.
No, it's so great to connect with like a new audience. Museum or yeah.
I love the ideas.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, I don't, it's yeah, we've been really
But Saturdays and Sundays should be better than night.
federally, like as everybody has. So it's like,
Because I also.
I mean, but we're still moving forward.
Right.
It's just, yeah, it's
It's a lot of them grants.
right. Well, that's a big part of it, and then it's also just to shape your economic times for funders, private funders, and then also like state funders.
Next time I see you, I'll say hello.
So, it's been a lot of our news in the past few months.
You know, I'm
Yeah, it's like we're not, it's definitely still happening, we're excited, we're ready to quite a bit move forward, not quite sorry yet.
It's basically a story.
I didn't support it.
Yeah, so I
moved away in 2002. Left behind everything I did here.
They would be my number 3 and 4.
And we just
Right here. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's like more than you did.
Do you want to stay in touch with your email address?
I know the whole bullshit.
so like,
I'd love to do
I started having back problems.
So they're sold out for May, but me and Beth are making a little
Thank you.
See where the last 20 years, every time
It's gonna be a fun show.
June 20th.
I'm probably gonna be there and like some
I
other
know
kids
what
will
I
be there.
do.
How about June 20th?
We lived right downtown, right off the mall.
June 20th is pretty well for me. I moved just getting a check.
And I looked up.
And then one doctor says, I want you to do
Live.com.
Yeah. Lower here.
You need surgery yesterday.
The crime rate, as you probably know, is lower.
It happened so
So
quickly.
I told all my friends, I'm moving to San Francisco from
And they were
lower
like,
Texas.
no.
Nobody believes that. It's absolutely
I
true.
didn't know that about you, and things like you.
Right.
That sounds perfect. Before you and
Well,
Randy,
you know, what's that?
Okay, yeah.
They're not voting for you.
so you guys did good.
We did.
I think she thought, well, that's.
I have the box still, so you can.
As long as the picture was
The reason they feel safe, when they saw the Tenderloin to make them feel safe,
Yeah.
you're right, there's a Hyde Street, and they got.
Oh, you're up there. I remember so many stories. You ordered a
Yes, please.
concert. There was some people. David.
Don't worry about the ritual.
I'll have to start a book club at McKinney.
Oh, sure.
We have a roll that we have one rotary ones, not so much.
Okay, nice. So funny how Chelsea on the street.
Well, we'll need to start.
Unfortunately, I'm not that good at remembering faces and
We left Washington.
Exactly. You guys had such fun about that. I left DC.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
On the museum.
Thank you very much. And the play.
Can I get my copy? And so, Randy, we would love to have you seated over there with Katie, just so that we can do one more post shot. I'll reach out to you real soon about tickets. All right, so just have a sit here. I want everyone to really enjoy what's going on and have the best feedback for one of our So let's have a sit here and smile. Perfect. I'll make sure to send these via these as well. And I purchased a book too. Can I get it signed by the book? The forward is written by you this time, right? Yeah. Two luminaries.
Well, you know,
Yeah, well, definitely a handful had.
And we have a lot of history lovers, but they also tend to be a population that fluctuates when we move to Tenderloin, so hopefully this people the courage to make it their way.
As I was saying, my daughter had experience of Rich's ice cream Saturday night. And this kind of experience she's talking about. People have these experiences all over San Francisco. If you're going to be the kind of person who's like, see something urinating, therefore turning as a city, move to city, have a city. It doesn't work. Don't move to hurt. Don't move to hurt you.
Yeah, Randy does some work.
So we sold about 8 books.
Not sure exactly. Maybe 10?
Yeah. I feel like it was almost a dozen, but something like that.
Are you walking back, Katie?
No, I'm taking me. The museum's closed today.
What?
The museum's closed today. Sunday.
Oh, you're going home?
Yeah.
I can walk with you if you need.
Okay, I'm just gonna run to the restroom. And Nika, we might come back for the collateral
Yeah,
and stuff.
I can happily
Okay.
put this in my office.
And then if you want to keep the flyers,
Sure.
then the one brochure.
I think if people are on, go buy plane tickets.
Definitely, yeah. So we can also put it out in our display table so that people can know about the play.
Yeah, thank you.
And see you June 20th.
Oh, sweet, you are going June 20th. Okay.
Well, I haven't bought the tickets yet, but I'll make sure to. Can I just have you?
Oh, yeah. I'll text it to you.
Perfect.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah, so Scott Wheeler's coming to see the play on June 20th. And then he wanted to give me a little certificate as they like to do.
Amazing.
So, and I still have to take my mom. So I was gonna maybe go that day. And a bunch of people from City Hall are going on the 20th too. It's really turned into a thing.
I'll become a star-studded gathering. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's gonna be quite an audience. It's kind of like in. Oh, I put my bag back there.
Are we gonna have the play open on Thursday during the prime time?
I think Mark wanted to maybe add a Sunday show, but we will see how that works out. Okay, Nico, I'm just gonna run to the restroom and take off.
Actually, I think this is enough for me to just put in a tote bag and drop it off at the museum.
Okay, that'll be great.
So it'll be easy. Yeah.
Thank you, Nico.
It's always a pleasure to have a luminary like yourself, a historical luminary like yourself, come through our doors. Take care. Have a safe trip back.